Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 93 of the Podcana podcast. This week, we have a very, very special guest. We have Bennet with us. Myself and Moyen have, spoken to Bennet, seen Bennet through many of the European DLCs. Bennet and Moyen actually have some history as well through playing various other card games. But the reason we have Bennet on the podcast today is because he recently took down a 100 player plus tournament, I think, with Amber Emerald, and as you guys can imagine, there was a lot of blue steel decks within that tournament, so I figured, as the Amber Emerald lover that I am, I would get another brother on to speak about the deck, and we can kind of discuss some play patterns, cry a little bit about how we still don't have any new cards for the deck, but it's definitely still relevant to discuss the deck. I think it's decently positioned within the meta for blue steel, at least, but it's definitely worth having a conversation. Before we jump into it, before I allow Bennet to introduce himself, I want to give a huge shout out to Vault X, who is an official affiliate for Podcana. They make amazing binders that you can store your cards in. My personal favorite is the Exotech Zip Binder XL. It's a 12 pocket binder, 26 pages. It holds 624 cards. If you purchase from Vault X, it also comes with a 12-month warranty from the date of purchase. If you guys want to save yourself some money when purchasing Vault X binders, be sure to use our link down below in the video description, or use code Podcana at checkout. So Bennet, hello. I hope you've been doing well. Congrats again on your recent victory and taking down the tournament. Feel free to introduce yourself to the viewers, maybe a little bit of your history within card games in general. Go for it.
Hey, I'm Bennet. It's a big pleasure for me to be on the pod. I've been listening to the pod since release, I've been playing Lorcana since release as well. I would call myself a competitive player because I have been traveling last year to every destination in Europe, at least that was possible, and tried my best to compete. With sometimes more, sometimes less success, but always trying to get better at the game. And I think Kawa and me have a longer history as well, at least for Lorcana, because I think I played Lemon, Lime, a discard in Bologna, and since then we talked about the deck and have been updating each other with our lists. Some of you may know that the deck has had his good states and worse states, and right now luckily we are in a better state, I would say. Just took down a 100-player online tournament, and specifically brought the deck because blue steel right now is very present, and I feel like we have very good answers and lines against this specific deck. Besides Lorcana, before Lorcana, I started my mini competitive journey in Hearthstone back then. I think I started playing the game 2014. And that's where I got to kind of know Moyen, because we were in the same practice group back then, long time ago, and actually had won a game against each other in an official tournament. And so it's kind of a full circle moment to sit here. So thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm eager to talk about Amber Emerald discard. And
awesome.
Much more.
Yeah, no, that's great. I remember.
Who won that game? I don't remember.
I did. So that's an anecdote. That's an anecdote I've been keep saying for a long time, because it was round one, and back then in Bologna you were rank one on the leaderboard.
I remember. That was my worst tournament.
Yeah, but, and I did not even beat you because I was like very good at that moment. I just high rolled you completely. I think I was down 2-0 and then won 3 in a row with a very high rolly deck, so that's fun. But you took revenge in a Marvel Snap tournament afterwards and crushed me 10-0, so I think I quit on that.
Awesome, yeah, it really comes full circle. I remember when, because I first met you, Bennet, it was the tournament in Poznan for set 3, right? And then you were like, oh yeah, I know Moyen from like Hearthstone and stuff like that, and it's crazy to think like, that's it's probably about a year ago actually that we had that tournament. It was like last March, I think. So yeah, really coming full circle. We've had a great first initial competitive season. you've made a lot of appearances on the featured broadcast, Bennett. Like a lot of the DLCs, you've been there for sure. And
I was so lucky. Actually, three times in my Swiss rounds. And after losing the first 2-0 on stream, I was lucky that I at least got a 1-1 in my last appearance on stream, and got an interview with Baker as well, with Lorcana Villain. So I was really happy I at least won one game on stream.
Do you know how often I was on stream?
0, right?
Really?
Yeah. No featured stream appearances. Yeah.
We have to flame production team then.
Yeah, maybe.
We can just flame Spessy. It's fine. Don't worry. Okay, yeah. So we're gonna jump into it. But before we jump into the decks and have all that type of discussion, we're gonna speak about our spilled ink section. This is our listener question section. If you guys want to have your questions read out on next week's episode of the podcast, be sure to leave a comment down below or pop a comment into our Discord server as well. The first one is from Mark. They say they agree that we should give time for the meta to develop a little bit more. This is in response to obviously last week's episode. We had the discussion surrounding Sapphire and the potential power level of some of those cards. But they continue to say, are Ruby Sapphire and Sapphire Steel good decks? Yes. Is there anything that could emerge to challenge them? Too soon to tell, in my honest opinion. The fact that DKP's deck wasn't on anyone's radar before Melbourne is a sobering reminder that despite the countless hours put into playtesting, innovation can still occur. I'm eager to get results from at least the next 2 weeks. What do you think? Yeah, I think I agree with this comment for the most part. And already, we've seen meta development, different techs coming into decks, trying to counter the popular blue steel lists. And Moyen, I'll let you speak upon this maybe a little bit as a general topic for maybe some of the adaptations that you've seen people take in dealing with this popular Sapphire Steel deck, because I know that's one thing that you mentioned a lot, right? Which was, we all thought that the set 6 meta was very much solved until kind of DKB brought the list to Melbourne and really changed things up, and that sparked a really interesting set championship season, in my opinion, because without that, I think it would have been very much a lot of the same decks that were played for most of the set 6 meta. But yeah, curious to hear your overall thoughts, and maybe before we jump into the round 2 lists for the LCCC, any potential changes you've seen already.
It's not necessarily tech cards, but it's more kind of the decks that are being played. Maybe the decks that would lose to it are starting to be played less, and then there's some innovation with item red blue builds, with the Ember Emerald discards, some different angles that are not just aggression. I think the aggressive decks, or the attempt to beat Sapphire Steel with aggression, kind of only works against the bad Sapphire Steel lists. So I think what they will accomplish is people will stop playing Oswald, people will maybe, I think the no ramp blue steel deck, I still think it's worse than if you play ramp in blue steel. So the Kiwi Birds list, or whatever you want to call it. So those might stay, but I don't think they're as good as the ones that play Sail and Tipo. But so yeah, they will push the bad blue steel decks out of the meta. I think the good ones will stay, and then the good ones, they're being tackled from different angles with discard red blue items, and also there's location red purple is. So there's a lot of stuff being tried at the moment, and we'll kind of see what sticks.
For sure, yeah. The next comment is from Harlan Sweet. He says, I'm not even sure if Bell's the problem anymore. If you ramp on 2 into Scrooge on 3, you can just lock out so many decks. A 4/4 that can sing Zeus is big. Yeah, this Scrooge has been very, very good from what I've seen. I watched you play a couple of games, Moyen, and obviously you played against me with it recently as well. And it's a pretty big powerhouse, especially if you can't bring it out on turn 3. Not a lot of decks can. I mean, yeah, it's funny. Everyone's like, oh, turn 1 3/3 so hard to deal with. That is true, but also a turn 3 4/4 is also pretty difficult to deal with for the most part. And it's not even trying to take the aggressive angle where you used to, some of the decks used to do ramp into the other Scrooge, right? The 4-drop 1 inkable 5/5 quest for 2.
5/5.
Yeah, this one just really helps you fish for your items, especially if you're playing a pretty heavy item build. So yeah, I think Harlan pointing out Scrooge, yeah, sure, it makes sense. It's definitely a impactful card. How have you felt the card perform, I guess, Moyen, since playing with it for the past 2 weeks?
I think it's absolutely insane. I cannot believe I still see some lists playing 3 Scrooge. I don't know why you would do that. It's an inkable, like, against a lot of the decks, it's your best follow-up to Ramp. So it's like your best turn 3 play. It is inkable. It, like, kind of 3 and 4 times gives you a card. Not just that it gives you a card, it gives you a card that also enables a lot of your other cards to work. So I think it's incredible. But I think you could be... So if Bell didn't exist and Scrooge did exist, right? I think still aggressive decks could beat you because you don't play a character on 1, you don't play one on 2, or maybe a Tipo, and then only then you start contesting board. But now, I mean, the problem also arises, especially the combination of the two. When you both have a Bell on 1, Ramp on 2, and then a Scrooge on 3, and suddenly it's like, okay, you cannot beat that opening with aggression.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. That particular opening is definitely strong, and I hope that does not happen to me in my future games against Blue Steel. The next comment. Sorry, go ahead, Bennet.
Just thought about, because before you had the Grammatala on, I mean, in red blue, but as a minion you want to continue on after Ramp, and now with the 4 stat line, the Scrooge also survives like 1, 2, 3 cost cards. The Bell at least dies to 2 cost cards that have 3 attack, but the Scrooge survives so much more with the 4/4. And I think it's kind of irrelevant if it's a 5/5 or a 4/4 in the comparison with the other Scrooge, because it has to have the 1 more willpower than the 3.
For sure, yeah.
It's actually funny. Against aggression, it doesn't matter if you have a 4/4 or 5/5. But I've played... I mean, the 5/5 is actually really good against the 4/4. So... like the 5/5 Scrooge can be a way for like Blurple, for example, to be aggressive because suddenly your Scrooge doesn't really do enough damage.
Yeah, for sure. The next comment is from Hater Time. They say, I think the ban call would be Popsicle. It does too much and enables Bell, Hiram, New Tamatoa, and Scrooge. It drawing a card and removing damage or just acting as material in combo decks. And yeah, I have a note here saying there was a lot of comments just speaking about Popsicle in general. I think it's an interesting discussion to have. I don't know if banning it is... I mean, listen, like, the whole point of the episode last week was we wanted to have a discussion around these cards rather than straight up saying, this card should be banned, this card should be banned. I still don't think banning Popsicle is, like, a great solution to the problem. I'm sure a lot of people would be happy if Popsicle potentially got banned, not the Blue Steel players. But, yeah, like, I haven't really spoken about this personally too much, but I do think that we're getting to a certain stage of Lorcana, not even just for this like Blue Steel list or whatever, but like I personally would like to see some like rotation announced, like in the near future at least, because if not, everything is gonna it's just gonna basically just keep getting power creeped, and if they don't power creep enough, then basically it's going to result in a lot of the existing cards just being the played cards, and like, you know, 1 or 2 cards from future sets coming out then also being the play cards. And I know a lot of people are maybe a little bit skeptical about rotation, especially maybe some of the newer players to TCGs, because, oh, I've spent all this money on all these cards and suddenly I can't use these cards anymore. But I think for a game like Lorcana and any type of like competitive TCG, you need to look at the overall health of the game, the overall health of the meta, and even with like Blue Steel and stuff like this, like, yes, it's a powerful deck, but like I mentioned, I think in the other podcast, as long as the data isn't like, oh, you know, 40%, 50% deck representation, or like an absurd amount of clear data to say this deck is absolutely busted, then I don't think that particular action maybe needs to be made. Maybe that's a hot take, but I just think that data really reinforces certain decisions, and maybe we still need to accumulate a little bit more of that data. I see you smirking there, Moyen. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. No,
I mean, I basically agree, but also to me, what I think banning Popsicle is just such a weird idea, because we've already doubled down on the idea of it's okay for a 1-cost item to be inkable and draw a card with Fortisphere. So like, should we ban Popsicle because it's the slightly better item than Fortisphere? I feel like we're at the point where we just have to say, okay, it's okay for these items to exist. Maybe just don't print the most insane payout for items, because there is these cantrip items. But I I don't think we are I really don't get the idea of banning Popsicle, and I think Popsicle is completely fine card, and I think it's well designed. I wouldn't like Popsicle to go.
Yeah, and it's like a big engine piece as well. It's like once you kind of take one of those pieces out, it's like you know, a lot of the Sapphire decks, you know, suddenly Sapphire decks like have card draw through Popsicle and Hiram. Well, okay, maybe suddenly they just don't. And maybe that makes Sapphire decks a lot worse. You know, like maybe Sapphire decks then just have to become more of these kind of aggressive decks. I remember Sapphire in set 1. Like, I don't know how many people who were playing Lorcana remember this, but like Sapphire in set 1 wasn't great because it didn't have this element of card draw. And I remember an episode of myself, Moyen, and Brendan like discussing this, saying, you know, if this ramp deck had draw and had ways to remove, like it would be, you know, at the time, like the perfect control deck. And the way you could kind of measure that was like, yeah, like red purple in set 1 was kind of like the control deck. You didn't have ramp, but it was like so important to get to 7 ink, to get to like your be prepared at everything. You know, you're playing very suboptimal cards at the time, but at the time they were like the best thing you could do. So yeah, I also kind of agree that I think if you took Popsicle out, it would remove a huge element of what makes Sapphire decks tick, and I think that might actually end up being a worse problem overall. Like, I think people find it so easy to say, oh, just ban this, of course it'll be fine. It's like, there's a reason why everyone's not a game designer and a game balancer. Let's just say that. Us included, by the way, right? Like, we've got thoughts and we've got suggestions, but there's a big reason why I'm not working on this type of stuff, you know? And the last comment we have before we move into the decks is from Lorcana Hoodrat. They say, I'd buy a Moyen guide. I like how Moyen doesn't exaggerate. So, Moyen, do you want to talk about, obviously, like, you've been streaming a lot, right? Do you want to just, like, speak about that and maybe some future potential stuff you might be posting?
Yeah, sure. So, well, I probably exaggerate at times, but I mean, I try to keep it at a reasonable amount that I'm exaggerating. Or I try not to exaggerate too much. Yeah, I've been streaming every now and then. Recently, I have like 2 or 3 streams now. And I'm very, very happy with how many people are tuning in on both the Podcana channel on YouTube and also my Twitch. And I've had a lot of fun playing Pixel 1 Connect ranked. We did actually, so I think, oh no, now I can't exaggerate. It was something like 15 best of 3s in a row that we've now won on stream.
How many did you lose?
But maybe, okay, so in total, it's like, I'm on 3 losses. So I started like 5-3, and since then, the last 2 streams didn't lose. So that's been good. And I am in the process of setting up a Metafy as well. Because just as a way to monetize me spending most days, almost my entire day on Lorcana, right? You can't do this without monetizing it. But still, I want to ensure the viewers, like all the content on Podcana will be the same. It's not like I will suddenly not talk about my thoughts because I want to hold them back for a specific guide. Yes, the guides will be like locations where you can find all of my thoughts in maybe regarding a deck, how to play it, how to mulligan, everything in one place, and like put so everyone can hopefully understand it well. But I will not suddenly not share my lists or not talk about my thoughts. I don't think I want to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good clarification. That Podcana will stay the way it is with the weekly episodes of the podcast, extra content scattered here and there, as we kind of feel like it. But yeah, again, that was the Spill Dink section. If you guys want to have your questions read out on next week's episode of the podcast, be sure to drop a comment down below. All right, yeah, so taking a look at the deck list, the first one we're going to be discussing is, of course, Bennet's build of Amber Emerald. I guess go for it, Bennet. You can start speaking about the deck overall, maybe like where you were with it initially when you first picked it up back in Bologna, why you've decided to stick with the deck, and maybe some of the particular reasons why you feel like it's still pretty good into this kind of blue steel meta.
Mm-hmm. So I, as I said, played this deck for a longer time now, and something that has always been good for this deck is that blue is taking a lot of time in the early game to set up themselves for the mid to late game, and in the process also decimate their own hand with ramping, for example. So we always had a window with our deck. We have a lot of different discard cards, a window where we can bring them down to 0, and that's basically the most important thing. If we can achieve that in a meta, we can bring decks down to 0 hand cards, and they are reliable on their top deck. That's a really good standpoint for the deck to function in the meta. That's why I picked it up in set 7 now, because even though, and we both chatted about it, we got literally zero cards we can play. I still wanted to find out if it has power and potential against blue steel, and I have to shout out Moyen because you gave the tip to train. If you test, play their best hands and draw the best hands. And I was like, every game I played, I was like, you don't have bell, please draw the bell. I want to see how good I am against the bell, stuff like this. And in a practice session, I found out with the testing partner Elias, shout out, hey, that it actually works against blue steel. Like, if they have a good hand and we have a good hand, we have ways to defeat them. Specifically, as I said, they are still using their hand to get more ink, and that what works well. Also, what's really good against blue steel specifically is that every minion character is beatable with Kida and Under the Sea. Last set, when Maui Shark got popular, we had no direct removal of that card and had to tag cards in. Like, for example, the Madano's Best or something, and now we can just play our normal deck list without tagging semi-good cards, and can still defeat the whole board. So that was the starting point, and that's why I took it into the tournament to actually test it in a tournament setting as well. And yeah, what can I say? It worked really well. But this, what's really great about this deck is that in a 2-game format, you start one game. And this deck has a really great high roll potential with Diablo and John, like the 2 key pieces of the deck. If they work out in the early game, you can snowball really well into the mid to late game and win from there. And I think those are a few thoughts. What's funny about this specific list, it does not only not play new cards from set 7, the highest set in there is set 4. So we could go back in time to take the list and win the set 7 tournament. It's really funny, and also shows how less love this deck got throughout the last sets.
For sure, yeah. I want to speak about some of the particular inclusions, because this is stuff that yourself and myself, we discussed a lot. So we've got like this one-off copy of the Ursula Vanessa, the Amber 2-drop. And I remember initially a lot of people, this seems like kind of a natural inclusion in a deck like this because it's like Singer 4. Maybe it helps out with Under the Sea a little bit better. But as I remember I was speaking with you earlier, the reason why I like this is because it's a 1/4, so maybe it's a little bit more difficult to take out compared to Sir Hiss in a kind of damage-based removal meta. But Sir Hiss has its own advantages as well because of that evasive. It can stick on the board a lot longer. You can use it to sing a discard song if you have John there, and it's just a little bit trickier to remove. If your opponent uses removal to get rid of the Sir Hiss, most of the time I still feel okay about that. But this 1/4 Ursula, I particularly love this split of the 3/1 because I'm definitely still more in favor of the Sir Hiss. But the Ursula, it helps out a little bit more. Say, for example, if you have a Muses on the board and this Ursula, you can then activate Under the Sea for Sing Together. But for the most part, I think the Singer 4 on this is actually, it's not that relevant in this deck. It's 100%. It's less relevant than you would initially expect because you can't use this and a 3-drop, like Prince John or something to sing Under the Sea the way you can with Ariel. So for that reason, I think this card can kind of come and go out of the deck depending on what meta we are in. But I really do like this split for the blue steel meta at the moment. The other card I wanted to speak about was Strike a Good Match, because this is a card that you've had in your deck for quite some time for Amber Emerald, and I was speaking to Moyen recently about this card, just really trying to understand it because like refrained from playing it a couple of times. I was trying Heffalumps and Woozles. You could even try Be Our Guest in that slot if you're specifically searching for some character cards. I think that works fine as well. But I was talking to Moyen, and I kind of started thinking that Strike a Good Match is kind of like a 2-cost inkable, singable Develop Your Brain, except it's better than Develop Your Brain because the 2 cards you get, you don't have to. Obviously, with Develop Your Brain, you put it to the bottom of your deck, but if it's going to the bottom of your deck, it's very similar to discarding, depending on how much you're cycling through your deck. But Strike a Good Match, you could basically get rid of one of your uninkables if it's breaking your hand, potentially. And it just allows you to see more of your deck. And the benefit of a card like this is just having more choice is actually quite important, because in certain situations, you might need that extra song to help bounce your aerial or discard one of your cards, one of the cards in the opponent's hand, or you might actually need a specific character card, like you've got the Under the Sea in hand, but you're searching for that for that Kida piece. So, in that sense, kind of comparing it to the idea of what Develop Your Brain does, I'm a lot higher on this card, just like thinking about it more, and I'm eager to test it a little bit. And I know this is something you mentioned, Bennett, where Strike a Good Match was another reason why you opted to play Lucifer as well, because it's the type of card that if it bricks you, Strike a Good Match can kind of help you filter out of your hand a little bit more, right?
Yeah, I think if I try to use my finger for argue for every reason this card is good, I would need more hands, because I think 10 reasons are not enough. There are so many good things about Strike a Good Match. It's inkable, so every time we don't need it in a game, or we already have a good hand, we don't need to dig deeper. We can just ink it away. It's a 2-cost song, which on the one hand allows us to sing with Hiss and Diablo. Really good singer, because they most of the time stay on the board after singing because of their evasive status. Also, it's searchable with Aerial. So if we, for example, are looking for an Under the Sea, it kind of works like a chain link or a link to then after that get the Under the Sea. And there are so many. Also on we want to most of the time play Prince John on 3. It's like one of the most important cards in the deck. And if we already have a Hiss on board, we can use our turn 3 before playing something. We can draw with the Hiss, like sing and Strike a Good Match, draw 2 cards, and hopefully draw the John in those 2 cards. And you mentioned Be Our Guest. This would have had the same reasoning, would do it a bit better than Strike a Good Match in that case, but Strike a Good Match is way more flexible than Be Our Guest, because it can search kind of everything. Before the tournament, I had one more Be Our Guest and one less Painting the Roses Red, and I changed those. Because I actually feel like it's so tight. We have so many draw spells and things we can like kind of search. It's almost enough at this point. We don't need more than that. It works perfectly.
For sure, yeah. That's one line I haven't even considered myself, and another reason why I like Strike a Good Match is like the importance of John on turn 3 in this deck cannot be overstated. So that opportunity to then search through your deck a little bit more to potentially find it is definitely relevant for sure. I'd like to speak to Moyen now here and get your idea of this deck specifically against Blue Steel. Maybe some of the advantages that you feel like this deck has coming at Blue Steel, like you mentioned, from a different angle, and then some of the obvious disadvantages it could have when you start kind of chaining Pete against us or something like that. Obviously, there's ways we have to potentially navigate around that, but yeah, we played a few games yesterday, and it was definitely interesting testing for sure.
Yeah. I get to all of that. Just regarding the Be Our Guest Strike a Good Match discussion. To me, though, I mean, as someone that doesn't play the deck as much, right? The Be Our Guest almost seems like to me almost seems more appealing than Strike, mostly because to me the deck seems super reliant on John, right? It's the games where they don't draw John, they're like, it's impossible to lose to Ember Emerald when they don't have a John almost. With most decks at least. But when they have a John, it gets a lot trickier. And they have, like, they can either hard play it on 2 or play a sing on 2, then sing it, so to really have that John on 3. But I mean, it's not much better than Strike a Good Match at finding the John. It's like slightly better. And then I can see that it's less flexible. I also looked at, okay, Be Our Guest, while it should find a character, there's the off chance that it doesn't find a character at all. And check the math on it, it's like over 3%. And while maybe it is slightly better for the deck when it does hit, but I think it can easily lose your game if you hit the 3% just 2-cost song do nothing. So I can kind of see that.
Just
Okay.
one comment to that Biergäste and Striker Good match, because there was one list that was played, I think, for top 16 in Birmingham, that played 4 Striker Good match and 2 Biergäste. And it's one of my favorite Ember Emirate lists because it's so streamlined on those early plays. And I think it was in the red-blue meta, if I'm recall it correctly. And that's kind of always something I've been looking and trying to implement in my own deck, because you're so combo and synergetic heavy that you need to, like a snowball, go into the next step and get bigger every time. And that's why
It's exactly right. The deck doesn't just work if all of your cards do their thing and they're okay for what they cost. You really need to get to the stuff that makes the deck stand out. And against Blue Steel, I think it can do that quite well. Some of the weaknesses, one of the things you've mentioned is Kida Under the Sea literally removes every single character. So there's nothing they can develop to get around that, unless except they can do a Pete to maybe stop the Under the Sea. Some of the Blue Steel decks play mana, but that's like kind of a different Blue Steel deck than the one that I think will stay popular. And then outside of that, it used to be like an okay matchup, but not a great one. But the thing is, Blue Steel used to play Grab Your Swords, and Blue Steel got so many good new cards, and the meta doesn't really need a Grab Your Sword, so Blue Steel can never afford to run Grab Your Swords in this meta. Which then, in turn, means if you play a John, and as long as you don't exert your John, you know it's never getting banished. And that's like a huge advantage that Ember Emerald can take advantage of. And so, but that being said, I'm still... I would still say I'm still skeptical that it like maybe destroys or is like really good against Blue Steel. We've tested the matchup yesterday, and I think we went 4-4 or 3-3, something like that.
3-3, yeah.
So it was still even in the end, I think. It is pretty good at breaking serve. So like it's pretty good at winning second, I want to say. Just because it's not, of course, the deck still would love to go first when it can. Diablo's much better, it can do the Prince John stuff earlier. But it's really not the end of the world that your opponent starts with 1 card less, and that does still help you get them down to 0.
Yes.
So it is still a pretty good deck at being able to go to 0. I think it has it has a very close matchup against Blue Steel. I'm not quite sure who is slightly favored, if anyone is slightly favored. And outside of that, I think it's pretty good against it can be pretty good against aggression as well, because all you need to do is kind of get a single Under the Sea out and kind of stabilize from there. I think the biggest weakness or problem that Ember Emerald could face in this meta, if there ever becomes like a red-blue deck, if ever a red-blue deck becomes popular, but not one that plays sharks and actions, but one that plays coils, Scrooge, Sisu. And I personally think that's the likeliest direction for red-blue to be heading. And once that it establishes itself, maybe Ember Emerald will have a little bit more of a difficult time. Until then, I think it's very well positioned.
Yeah, I think at that stage, once that red-blue deck becomes a little bit established, we might go back and hide in our cave, because it's very difficult. In our cove, that's true, yeah. One of the play lines that is like particularly disgusting against us for the some of the new red-blue lists is even just like the coil on 2, ink play Sisu, that can banish a Diablo on the Cove. So suddenly your whole idea for playing Cove is, I mean, it's not irrelevant because Cove still helps against like Brawl and stuff like that, but if coils become more popular and that opener becomes just like decent against a lot of decks, then yeah, it's a challenge. But we
now have to bare necessities the coil instead of other stuff we want to bare necessities in the worst case to get around this CISO thing, and that does not sound really, really good, yeah.
For sure, yeah. And the only way we could do that, right, is we would have to have the we'd want to have the Diablo shift happen, and then we can sing the bare necessities. Or if we're like incredibly scared that this is like the one thing that shuts us down, like, yeah, maybe we... Well, I don't think you ever want to hard cast it, because the whole idea is you're doing the shift Diablo to then, sing it. But that was also a really strong line, yeah, where like you could I mean, that's honestly, it's probably potentially one of the best openers in the game where you go Diablo in one and then you can shift Cove and then sing Bare Necessities to get rid of something.
Yeah, it's crazy. This would protect your Diablo from a hand with Coil and Brawl in this instance. So that's not bad. But you need, that's like a 5-card opener or a 5-card opener, because you need a song to discard for Diablo as well, and this is not very likely. So I'm more okay with just having to need one of the defense options. That's more likely than this opening. Yeah,
for sure.
I guess that's one last thing that Ember Emerald is really good against, that Sapphire Steel is doing.
Yeah.
Because the one last thing I want to mention about that is like, against some decks, it's kind of a gamble if the Bare Necessities ever discard something. Like against Red Blue, or about some decks, they can proactively ink in a way where suddenly your Bare Necessities misses, and if you do it and miss, that's like a huge setback. Against Blue Steel, one, they just have a lot of cards that get hit with all of the items and all of the songs. And also, a lot of the time you have knowledge about if they brought an item back. So there's not the chance of, oh, maybe I miss. So that's also really good about Ember Emerald.
For sure, yeah.
I agree. Also, one last thing that's really good is that they don't run evasive answers. I mean, until now, I can imagine that also with probably a Genie, which I think is a bit underplayed in this meta, because it, besides Soys, is really great against Blue Steel as well. And if you pair it with Ursula and Green Purple, you can even get rid of the Soys beforehand. And they just have the spells to shoot the Diablo, and as we said, the protection is possibly there. So if we get the Diablo through and we draw more cards, that's also very dangerous for the Sapphire Steel deck.
Yeah. I'll also say one last point about this. We all had a last point to make about this deck. I do want to speak just briefly about the maybe the idea of Lucifer in this deck, like you mentioned, over Cricky, and that can definitely be a little bit of a flex slot depending on if locations kind of come back into the meta. For example, like let's say that red purple location deck came back, I could imagine Cricky being put in instead of the Lucifer. But also, not only that, it's the idea of like what you were saying, Moyen, how like Pete can literally kind of stop this deck's entire game plan. The importance of maybe being able to hold something, especially if you basically know that the Pete's going to come out after you've played your John on 3. So whether that be, you're able to keep Amuses potentially to play it, an Aerial. Even I know I did this to you yesterday, Moyen, where I happened to have another 2-drop Ursula. So you played the Pete and I was still able to play the Ursula, and that was like a pretty big swing. And it even got me thinking of the idea of the 4-cost Daisy Duck, right? That's just a 2/3. You make your opponent discard a card. I believe, Bennett, you were on like a one of those, and 3 You've Forgotten Me at one stage, kind of testing that line out. So yeah, I'd just like to hear your general thoughts on maybe advice of how Amber Emerald players can try to navigate against the Pete, even though of course it is still tricky to keep that card at the same time, right?
Yeah, I think Pete, the most dangerous Pete usage is in Purple Steel or in Digihole, because they set up so much early lore that they can use the Pete relatively early in the game to seal the game, because we then have no single answer against it most of the time. In the tournament I won against 4 Petes, a game where they had 4 Petes as Blue Steel. Because as you mentioned, I tried to, if possible, keep a non-spell line to react to a Pete turn, to not be like, okay, I can't do anything right now because I wanted to play the You've Forgotten Me. I tried to keep the Muse. And also, Pete doesn't really progress them in the game. So a Pete that does not 100% block us from doing something doesn't get them further into the game either, and makes them more vulnerable because they just lost a card from hand that they didn't really make the most use of. And they can't really hold on to the Pete to have the perfect before Under the Sea turn moment, because we as a discard deck can punish that really hard if they, because of holding on to the Pete, for example, play suboptimally or something like that. So Pete actually is not that big of a threat as you might think, but of course he has the potential to lock you out of the game without anything. You can stand up and go, and that's the only thing you can do in sometimes. What helped me also in this game where I played against 4 Petes, I play 3 Coves now to have a bit more protection for Diablo against Bell and Storm and stuff like this. And the Cove allows me to use my ink without playing spells because I can put everything into the cove. And actually, the stat lines for Muse with then 3-5 or an Aerial which goes to 3-4 is actually really good against Blue Steel. At least the Kiwi Bird low to the ground version where they play a lot of 3-3 characters, stuff like this.
For sure, yeah. I've definitely been trapped though as well, where I'm like, oh, I make my Aerial a 3-4, this is so good, and then she's trapped in the cove, and Muses can never bounce her again. So
no, that's true.
Yeah,
you can paint Rose red on her.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, you can. But yeah, I know Moyen's probably like, oh my god, can these guys shut up talking about Amber Emerald?
One last thing.
Yeah.
And then I really will stop talking about the deck, because I think that's really interesting. Before that, I played a lot of Quickie every time because I was so scared of getting locationed. But also here the argument, if they try to opt for a location, for example, a mana on 4, that does not really progress them in the game very much. And they kind of waste their turn 4 and are more vulnerable to our discard. And the Sir His, which is unchecked, can kill the mana in 3 turns, or like 2 turns together with a Cove and another character. And Diablo as well as an evasive character. So locations are not that scary without Quickie. That was my result from testing. And we have the bare necessities. At worst case, we can just snipe it before. And now I will shut my mouth about this deck.
Oh. No, I mean, you can talk about this deck as much as you guys want. I just watch.
No, we're good. We're definitely done. We'll move on to talking about the next list. But
okay, just I think because next I think we'll talk about the LCCC round 2 decks.
Correct.
But before that there was one more deck that I found can tackle Blue Steel pretty well, that I played against today on the Pixel One Connect. That I thought. I mean, it's I think we should talk about. It is a kind of a meme deck. It might struggle against other decks, but it can pull off some very, very fun wins against Blue Steel, which is the green-blue deck that just kind of locks you out of the game with Peter Pan. So basically, there's the 7-drop Peter Pan, it enters play exerted, and it says your opponent can, if this is exerted, your opponent can only gain lore when they challenge, like after they've challenged for the first time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think. Yeah, when one of the characters has challenged, they can gain lore again. But what you can do now is you can use the Emerald Chromicon that says when you ink, give something evasive until your next turn. So you can give it evasive until your next turn. That already makes it difficult to deal with. As we said, Blue Steel doesn't have evasives. But they can remove it with songs. They can play Zeus, Strength. If it's no longer on the board, the effect doesn't work. Okay, that would be a problem. So that's why you play the Sardine Can. And it says, it's a 4-cost item, I think, and it says your exerted characters gain ward. Usually you would want your active characters to gain ward so that you finally get to use them. But with the Peter Pan, Emerald Chromicon, and Sardine Can, all you need to do is, all you need to do as a setup is play Emerald Chromicon and Sardine Can, and then at any point you play the Peter Pan, and if you can ink once per turn each turn, the Blue Steel player will not be able to do anything. They can't.
It's total lockout, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like they cannot challenge it. They cannot banish it in any way. And then you don't even need other characters. You can literally 20 turns in a row. If you can quest, if you can ink 20 turns in a row, you can just quest with Peter Pan each turn. So yeah, someone tried that against me today. They didn't get it off. That was sad, but they got into a few spots where if they had the Peter Pan, I would have been completely locked out. And the problem is, for that deck to actually have a good matchup against Blue Steel, I guess we'd need to think, okay, how reliably can they get the setup? I don't think it's super hard to get the setup. The problem is, of course, if Blue Steel ever plays any item removal, suddenly it doesn't work anymore. But I don't think item removal is good in Blue Steel. I don't think people should play it. So it's kind of like a window that maybe the meme deck has to beat Blue Steel. And the other problem is, of course, what if you play against a Ruby deck and you do all the setup and they just play Be Prepared? But I think against Blue Steel, it's looks like a very, very fun way to make your opponent not have any fun.
Yeah, you might have me testing a new deck, because that sounds sounds like my type of deck. I'm not gonna lie. Like it sounds to me that I don't know, because you think about it, and it's probably, I mean, yeah, if you can get to it reliably, it beats basically everything except Ruby decks that I can think of, right? Unless they play item removal.
They could also play evasives that just challenge it, right?
Do they play the band combo with Clarabelle as well? Because I feel like that's also a really effective thing to lock your opponent out of the game.
They were definitely playing band on me. I think there was a small Clarabelle, so there's probably a big Clarabelle. So like they don't have to win this way. They can also just do the normal Clarabelle band stuff to try to win.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, yeah. I will definitely try to look at some lists for that. Moyen exploiting. Well, it's funny, right? This would be hilarious if Moyen's like, oh, this might be the new deck, and next minute we see Moyen with like item removal in his deck or something. Yeah.
For hideaways.
Yeah, hideaways, yeah. Is the Sardian Can, is that like a... Because like, that seems like, from my memory, it's like a very expensive item, right? It's like 4 cost. Yeah. Is it uninkable, or maybe it's inkable?
It's inkable.
Yeah. It's yeah.
And I think it says that your evasive characters gain what? I mean, like,
no, you're exerted characters.
Just exerted. That's crazy. Yeah. Okay.
Super interesting.
Usually the thing is, if you exert your characters, they can just challenge them. So then it's not as good to have ward. Usually, like the ward stuff stays active, but with an evasive against no evasive decks, it can just kind of protect something.
Yeah, and that's funny that Peter Pan entering exerted is actually a good thing. Right, like because usually you don't want it, but it instantly gets ward, which is interesting. But yeah, we're gonna move on to discussing the round 2 versions of the deck lists from the LCCC. The first one we're gonna look at is Zan's list. I unfortunately don't have like the differences and the updates made.
Change.
Zan didn't change, did he?
Yeah, so it's the same deck. I still think it's bad, but it's okay.
Okay, next deck.
I mean, I think it's good against Ruby. First round, they were faced against Ruby, so it looked okay. But I still think this is not like the way to go
Never
forward.
Change your winning team.
Three Scrooge is crazy.
Moyen's a Tree Scrooge. My God. Yeah.
My God.
The next was Spessy. Do you know if Spessy made any changes to this list?
Yeah, they made a lot of changes. They were like so unhappy with their first round list. It was like was playing only 4s in first round and was playing 4 times the song that's like gain 1 lore, draw a card.
Mm-hmm.
And like during all of the games, they're like, no, this should be Maleficent. This is so bad. This is
the
too
card
slow.
sounds so good, but it's so bad. I tested it yesterday, and there's no window where you like to sing that song because you can just quest and get the lore anyway.
Yeah,
you just lose a lore basically.
It's not good when you sing it unless your hand is really awful to at least cycle it. But yeah, it's not a good song to sing. And spending 2 lore is also only good like very late in the game when it's faster than actually playing a character and waiting for that to quest. So this is like a lot faster. It's now playing a few fire the cannons as well. And I think this is like a lot more viable version of the deck. It still tries to go super, super fast with the Chromicons into burn. This round they were faced against Kurt Spies, who is on
Emerald Steel. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we tested the matchup this morning. It was very difficult for me to lose on him, but I still wish him the best of luck, and he feels like he cracked the matchup.
Okay, good for Spessy. The next deck is this is LD's list, which you're paired into LD, right?
I'm LD this round.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so basically, there is not. It's like a double elimination bracket, but there's no clear bracket. After you win, you paired against a new random opponent, so you can't just build for your specific opponent. But I knew I won, Artabax and the LD won, so like a good chunk of what I could face is them, and they usually play the same deck. And I felt very, very confident against what they submitted last week. But I think the decks that they submitted a little bit different decks, but like the same idea. And the decks that they submitted this week are much better against what I'm playing. I still feel slightly favored, but it's like very, very play draw dependent. So basically the biggest difference is I'm playing Ramp on 2. They're just trying to curve out. And I have to kind of recover the tempo that I lose on 2 by having 1 more ink every turn after that. I think, but the problem is now their version has a lot more threatening characters that have high willpower. So as soon as they get a decent amount of lore early game, they have these threats that are very, very difficult for me to deal with, or even impossible for me to deal with. So there's the Ana, that's just a 2-cost 1/4, basically quest for 2, because both Mickey and Belle are heroes. So I think that's a really good card that LD decided to play and Artabax I think didn't decide to play. And then there's the Alice, which is literally impossible for me to clear. So like, let's say they gain 16 lore and then play an Alice. I can remove everything except the Alice. Then they play any 2-quester. Alice quests gives the other 2-quester ward. They're at 18, and I have no way to clear anything with ward. So suddenly they're at 20. So I have to stabilize very, very early against them. Right, and the other thing that they included that they didn't include last time is the Pluto, which is surprisingly annoying, although I have the Tipo now. So there's like a lot of back and forth in this matchup when I tested it, because usually I would prefer to ramp with Sail, but if they miss their bell, I can maybe just get in with the Tipo, because then they can't easily sing a Storm on my Tipo. And then later, when they like set up their 2-drop, then they set up maybe the Alice, they play the Pluto. This Tipo can like be huge because it takes out, like it damages the Pluto suddenly. I don't have to sacrifice a Bell and trade with a Scooch. Suddenly my Tipo can actually sacrifice himself and I can trade with both Bell and a Scooch, something like that. So there's some nice back and forth in the matchup in that. I have no clue why they decided to play the Mickey. I'm not impressed with it. I think the Mickey, like the shift Mickey is bad. Like it is a decent stat line, 3-4 shift when you shift on 3 and quest for 2 with resist 1. But it's not even like a crazy good stat line. It still gets banished by Zeus. So I'm not quite sure how that made it in there. But other than that, this is like a blue steel aggro list that's a lot more tacked also towards beating other blue steel lists. So the matchup is a lot closer than it would have been against the round 1 list. I do think it's maybe a little bit worse against, like, let's say a DKP red-blue list, but DKP lost, so they knew they couldn't face that. So I think this list is a lot worse against the list that just ramps into Goofy, Wash Maui, something like that. And then also it's not great against like the big Sisu, with a lot of stuff that gets banished by the Cogsworth analysis. But in this mini blue steel bracket, I think it's a well-built deck that I'm only slightly favored against.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And like you mentioned, the line that you can take to play the Tipo and then get your Scrooge out. Like, because I imagine, like you said, like it's difficult for you to deal with the Alice. Scrooge is probably your best bet to be able to cleanly deal with it. But then if a Pluto comes down and you don't have the Tipo, it probably nearly feels impossible.
Yeah,
like,
it feels very bad. And also, there's one other thing, which is when they have the Alice Pluto curve, they will always have the decision. Maybe they gain 1 extra lore and don't give Pluto ward, or they give Pluto ward to at least protect themselves against the Zeus, because this week I submitted 2 Zeus, and if I get a Zeus off on Pluto, that is really, really bad for them.
For sure. The next list is from Federico. This is a red-blue list. It's from the looks of it, it seems like it's kind of the deck we were discussing earlier, right? It has this the line to go for the Sapphire Coil on 2. Granted, that doesn't need to be the only line it takes. Ramping, again, it obviously depends on matchups, but I would still say majority of the time is better. You just do your normal ramp into, your normal red-blue game plan, but the opportunity to have this alternative opener with the Sapphire Coil and Sisu opens up some interesting different lines at the start of the game. Would love to hear both of your initial thoughts on this deck in general. It seems quite standard. I don't really think there's too many different things going on here. Have you tested red blue much yourself, Moyen? Because I think from the last time I asked you were like, I tested it, but like blue steel just seems to be like, I mean, obviously it's the new deck. It seems a bit more powerful, but I think a deck like this could potentially come into the meta. Do you think? Well, it's already in the meta, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think this version not really. So, fun facts. This is Federico's deck, right?
Yes.
So he's the only other player than Zan that didn't change any cards.
Okay.
So all of the other decks were changed. And I think there is a place for red blue in the meta. I think it might be a deck that doesn't play Shark, and maybe even a deck that plays Scrooge as their 4-drop. I think if you're playing 4 coils, 4 popsicles, you don't need much more items than that to really make the Scrooge good enough or better than Tala. So it's not quite the version that I think might be the one. Like, it's not quite the direction that I think red blue will be heading in this set. But yeah, still just like a little bit of the more old school, or I don't know, old school, more traditional set 6 red blue that also plays the sharks, just in addition with the coils, and then a little bit more removal that goes alongside the coils.
Any thoughts, Bennett?
Almost a bit like a toolbox where they put like different cards in it to maybe even or to have more options. I saw a red-blue list that played I think 8 ice blocks, and that was more like streamlined to 4 copies of each card they were playing. And I think like this you are a bit more flexible. But on the other hand, you can't really do the strict game plan every time you probably want to do.
I don't know, with the introduction of Tamatoa Happy as a clan, red blue has just gotten even more reliant on drawing their popsicles. So it's not because I don't know, in blue steel it feels fair when they draw their 1-cost items because you just expect them to. But red blue is so reliant on drawing a few popsicles, and it just plays 4 of them, so it feels like a lot more swingy if they actually get their popsicles or not.
Sure. Yeah, well, that makes sense. Next one is Tia Time. This is his list. All I'm going to say is from initial glance, this looks very similar to your original list, I think, Moyen?
Yeah, last Ken.
I have the Dreamborn links. You know what it's called?
What's it called?
Or what they call it? It's called Bleu Gris Moyen. It's like blue gray Moyen. Yeah, it is very similar. It is still different enough, right? And it's more similar to the version that I submitted last week, where I was still playing Smees, and now I'm like kind of on Tipos. But also on top of that, now they decided to play 2 more items. They playing the 2 shields. They're not playing the Cogsworth, so they have like a little bit higher item density and a little bit like tech for the mirror. I'm not quite sure I can get behind cutting Tamatoas for manas. I think as good as the deck is, I think in some matchups it's still very, very helpful to be able to finish the game quickly before your opponent gets to their win condition to have like 4 Tamatoas. But I think it's an idea that I had also at the start of trying blue steel, because more of like 8-drop Tamatoa sometimes, or like there's a good amount where it's too slow. And also, it's a card that you ink a lot because you have to do so many things until you get to that point. But also, because you have to ink it so much in the early game, you're definitely happy to have 4 copies in your deck because that then means when later in the game you actually can still find it. Whereas with this deck, if you have to ink it early, maybe you will just never be pressuring like enough lore when your opponent in open deck list would also know, okay, maybe they inked 2 Tamatoas or 1, and now probably they won't have the other one. They can't finish the game off as quickly. But yeah, I can't complain about the deck too much because it has my name.
Makes sense, yeah. The next one we have is DKP's list. Correct me if I'm wrong, Moyen. I mean, this is just like his version of red blue. He has made some changes, though, I believe, right?
Yeah. So it's on the spreadsheets. It says he made changes. So let me think. There's definitely more Tamatoas. They were still on 2 there, so they were on 2 hideaways last week, and they're still on 2 hideaways. The Thala has gone completely, so that amazes me. Because it was like often it was 3 Thala, and last set I was always a big advocate for playing 4 Thalas in that deck, and now they're just gone entirely. So it's like a lot less 4 drops to fit more Tamatoas and hideaways. So I don't know, DKP's deck needs 5 willpower characters to stick. So instead of, they can't just say, okay, I won't play Shark. So maybe instead they're just saying, okay, I'll overload the removal that deals 5 damage, and I'll just play more stuff that can get removed by like something like a Zeus, but I just have so many, at some point something will stick.
Yep. Seems
I find it very interesting that he just plays 4 popsicles as items and 3 Tamatoas. I'm no red-blue player, so maybe I just can't get behind it. But Moyen, do you have an idea why is that like this, and why is not playing 1 or 2 more different items?
Well, it's like all of the other items are just like a lot, like they're like infinitely worse than popsicles. So they are just trying to like minimize the bricks. And I think what kind of also jumps out is, okay, there's only 3 Flower Charm, but there's also so little items. But it's like in this deck, it cares a lot less about value and a lot more about setting up a clock and getting ahead enough in tempo where they can set up enough lower gain to at then some point burn story to 20 lore.
Yeah.
And
Story
then
for game.
yeah, so the popsicle is very often banished just to heal instead of for the flower charm. But I mean, banishing it for heal still works really, really nicely with the Tamatoa. I guess the Tamatoa will have its like highs and lows in this deck, but its highs will be as good as in other decks, and it's still an inkable cards. And if it gets back one item, it's still really not the end of the world. So I can still see how Tamatoa is good enough for this deck.
Awesome.
Sure. Next we have Artabax's list. So quite different, quite a lot of interesting cards in this particular list. We can see the Magic Broom, we can see Chenpo, we can see Lawrence. Also has that one of Mickey that you're not a fan of, Moyen, right?
Yeah. No, but maybe I didn't look at it enough. So Artabax kind of I thought, I saw the Mickey Mouse 1-drops, the 1-shift Mickey Mouse. I was like, okay, maybe at least they had a lot of similar changes, but actually this is very close to what Artabax has been promoting as 4 blue steel for a long time in the set. I mean, for like a week. Because it's still playing the Benjas Lawrence as 3 jobs, it's still playing Talas, it's still trying to protect its manas as their main game plan, it's still playing Tamatoa as top end. But yeah, the big changes are it's also now playing some Mickey 1-drops that can help strength deal more damage, but also help be a little bit more aggressive. And also, at least this deck is trying to support the shift Mickey Mouse a little bit, because they're playing a few Magic Brooms. But I don't know
how I get it. I thought you wanted to say that they at least play Zeus, because I think LD's list didn't have a Zeus in it, and Mickey Mouse is a Zeus singer. But that's funny. Yeah, I didn't think about it. I just thought about, oh no, my Diablo's in danger.
Yeah, so I guess your Diablo, or there's one Emerald Steel in that they could have faced. So maybe they just thought, okay, that's kind of a tech for that. And now they're also attacking for Oswald list, because they can like open Mickey Broom, shift Mickey to deal 1 damage to Oswald. So it's a fun list. I think I would be better against this list though than against LDs, because this one doesn't play like the Alices that are
Pluto.
very difficult for me to deny.
Moving on to Mo's list. I'm gonna let you take the lead on this one, Moyen, because I'm not.
Me?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. You definitely.
Pass it over to Bennet.
Okay, Bennet, take the lead.
Okay. Yeah. I think blue green is a deck that you, if you want to test how it works, you sit there solitaire and play for like 1 or 2 hours and try to see if the things you want to do with the deck are actually doable. And I think it's a very hard deck, because it, like Ember Emerald, does stuff that's completely out of the dynamic from normal Lorcana, kind of. Trying to get a completely other win condition. I have personally not seen Inkgeyser and definitely not played it either, so I can't really say something against that. I have just experienced, I think it was in set 6 when I played Red Purple, and I got played against this deck, and there were games I felt completely chanceless, because they play their game plan and I have no answer to that, and after they bend my whole hand, I'm literally locked out of the game. So I think if you are able to get a list that consistently does that while still responding to threats in a meta, it can work. But I don't know if this specific list works out the way it looks.
I guess I collected my thoughts. I have a few takes on this. It's one, this deck's playing enough the items to support Scrooge. I like, in this Scrooge has like 64%. I don't care. That's good enough for me. Scrooge is a 4/4. If I'm playing like an item Flower Charm build, I think I'm playing Scrooge. That's one take, and maybe you play a few
over Tala, you think, in this?
For example, but the card that you should definitely cut is the Inkgeyser, because it doesn't do anything ever. It's like terrible card. And okay, I don't know. No, I will stick by it. I mean, the context could change, that it could become a better card, but I think right now you cannot play this uninkable card that, like, in 5% of the games maybe was okay. Because, like, in a lot of games, really, this doesn't do anything. I think, like, Bend to My Will is more of the main win condition of the deck, and I would like to see, like, less Inkgeysers, more Scrooges, maybe a bit more Bend. Or I would like to, I think maybe the best green-blue deck is just the Peter Pan deck. that tries to lock blue steel
The
out.
meme deck, yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's better than, I mean, having that as a win condition, because that's green blue is really good at like stalling the game, drawing cards, inking, but then somehow at the end, a lot of the time they still don't win. And like that's one way to win, at least against the blue steel decks. And I think maybe that might be the best way for blue green to go.
Yeah, I'm really curious.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm really curious now to do what Bennett was like suggesting earlier. You know, when you're kind of playing with the best hand, right? Like I'm curious to try and do that Peter Pan combo to see how consistently I can kind of do it. And like you mentioned, Moyen, like that's probably the most important thing. Is like how consistently can you do this if you feel like you can do it enough. I mean, it's such a incredibly huge win condition. So. I mean, it just sounds, it's so funny. Like to a lot of people, maybe that sounds really unfun, but to me, it's like combo-y, right? And that's kind of the type of deck.
If that was the meta, I guess people would just take item removal and it would no longer be meta. But like,
for sure,
if you face that a lot, I don't think it would be a super fun experience. But like, probably locking your opponent out for this first few games when you finally do it is a very fun experience.
Yeah, probably even more so if it's actually harder to pull off, because then you feel a lot more rewarded when you actually get to pull it off.
It's like back when you had the the Pride Lands, make your stuff cost 0 and then
play
the Rockstar Stitch and play your entire deck, stuff like that, where you like usually don't pull it off, but it's like
or the Beast Relentless Bayou combo.
Oh yeah,
that's been around since set 2. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or Jafar also only a meme combo.
Yep. The one thing I want to point out on this as well, though, is that there's, well, we probably mentioned before when speaking about blue green, but like Heffalumps and Woozles in this deck is not only just an okay song to combo with muses to draw a card and bounce something. Against Sapphire specifically, it is actually quite good. You can turn off your opponent's Hiram, you could turn off your opponent's Tamatoa. It's probably the best against Hiram, like realistically. But yeah, it's what we spoke about already, where like blue green doesn't really have that many like amazing songs. I mean, it has okay songs, but are the songs good enough for you to be able to, like, I think this type of build is probably the best songs you could pair with muses to consistently try to pull it off. I don't think there's too many other ones that you can fit in there. But yeah, cool deck for sure. I think ultimately I probably agree with what you said, Moyen. Bend seems to be the better thing that blue green can do, so maybe that's the strategy to take, is to focus on that a little bit more.
Yeah, blue green at least now. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Has ways of reducing the attack to then Under the Sea. I think before Under the Sea was a good card technically, but it didn't work out most of the time. And now it has a full board clear or a potential board clear as well again, which I think helps the deck very much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's just one last card that in green blue is like somewhat interesting. It's the new set 7 Pete, the 1-drop. That's just like when you play an action that isn't a song, banish an item. I think maybe that deserves some exploration as well. And then maybe you play like, you have Sail, Vision, maybe you play Develop, and you can actually like banish a lot of items when they come out without spending too much on doing so. The problem is, I guess it gets stormed and then you're sad. But other than that, it's a pretty cool card.
Yeah, for sure. The next list is Kurt Spice's list, which is that Emerald Steel we mentioned. And the main like new set 7 card that's in this is the Pete, which I can imagine this Pete's quite annoying to play against if you're blue steel, if it hits the board. Moyen, do you think?
I mean, when does it hit the board? Maybe turn 4 if they spend both turn 3 and turn 4 on developing it. Or turn 6.
It would cost more than with cost 7 than it initially costs, and you lose a card as well.
Yeah, and then it's like, okay, they invested so much, it's probably okay. Or when they play it turn 6, maybe I already have my H-Drop Tamatoa on the board. So yeah, it is annoying to deal with, but it just comes down a little bit late where you can often raise it. So that's how you kind of get around it being annoying to deal with.
Any other thoughts on the deck in general, with it being like I guess like another Diablo John deck? Obviously this deck isn't going to be discarding your cards nearly as much as Amber Emerald, but like maybe any advice for blue steel players to combat this deck in general? Well,
it is focused, like you have to focus very much on Flower Charm. still, this is like the no Merfolk Emerald Steels basically give you so much time to set up your draw engine and then stabilize that you don't have to like, you can ignore some of the pressure that they're putting up, and you shouldn't sacrifice your draw engine to deal with their pressure, because you can usually like get back board easily enough. The way you remove Diablo is like kind of having a bell to sing songs. Yeah, the matchup's pretty good. I don't think Emerald Steel got too much better, but it still has, of course, some like very high rolly hands with the Diablo and Cove or Diablo plus Ursula, or just Diablo and you don't have removal can already do a lot.
Yeah. I think I kind of feel like a broken record saying this whenever we're speaking about Emerald Steel now, but yeah, I do agree that I think the new tools are cool, interesting, fun perhaps, but my favorite time with this deck last set was when it was the Merfolk version, because I felt like I could go fast enough, still disrupt, and potentially be able to close out the game. Whereas a lot of the shift lines I've kind of been seeing for Emerald Steel just haven't seemed to do it for me, at least. Like I just prefer to be that little bit more aggressive and then still be able to do the game plan of, you know, Ursula to sing songs to remove and keep progressing by like questing and stuff. But maybe that's just my experience. I haven't found like the shift Pete and the like shifting package for Emerald Steel to be maybe as much better as I thought it would have been coming into set 7. Next list is Zach Bivens. Did Zach win his round 1, Moyen, do you know?
Yeah, I think so. There was like a Twitter post where he like posted this super big board that he put up, so probably I think they won.
Yeah, so Zach's on a right now on track to potentially becoming the two-time champ, right? If he keeps going.
Find him, flatten him. I think that's already a meme in the community, because it comes up every time Blue Steel was in the talks, and I think the consensus most of the time is that it's not good. That's why I'm really interested in why it's in this deck. Moyen, do you think it's a danger, this card, for you as a Blue Steel player?
No, the more I find him, I flatten him, my opponents play, the happier I am, because it doesn't do anything usually. Like in Ember Steel, at least it's like an incubate song, so the downside is a lot lower. But in any other deck, it's like really awful, and in Ember Steel, I'm not sure it's good enough.
It's probably better against Oswald versions than against the normal Blue Steel item version, right?
Yeah, it's much better against the decks that rely on their Quill and their Workshop. And I think like the version that I play doesn't rely on either too much. So maybe that's also a big reason why I don't care so much about it. But yeah, it's much better against Oswald versions for sure.
Yeah. Like the most interesting thing to me that I've seen happening within like these versions of Amber Steel builds, I'm yet to play test it or even play against it, is the idea of Miss Bianca as this like 4-cost inkable 5/5 technically if you have an ally on the board, and that's the whole thing of why people were kind of comparing the Troubadour to Ursula Vanessa. Troubadour helps you with your Miss Bianca line better than the Ursula, but then the Ursula's better with your Rapunzel for healing, because it's 4 willpower rather than 3. But this, to me, this just looks like it's like the normal stuff that Steel Song does. I haven't played Steel Song in a while, but like whenever I play it, I always have a fun time, to be honest. But yeah, like this version of Steel Song has just been in a bit of a weird place, I think, for a while, because for the past few sets, at least, like Red Blue, I feel has kind of pushed this version of the deck out for the most part, and then they've, you know, transferred over to the more aggressive version, the Diggy Hole deck. I don't know if a 4-cost 5/5 coming down is gonna change the deck all that much, but I'm curious to see how Zach continues his run with it. I will say I think Zach's an incredible Steel Song player. He's been playing this deck for a very, very long time. So if anyone's able to pull stuff off with it, it's definitely that man.
Yeah. I mean, the best. So okay, the Troubadour is a cool addition. It's slightly better than Ursula. The Bianca's nice, but like the best thing that has happened to Amber Steel is, I think, suddenly the main deck to beat is Blue Steel. And that's much easier for them to tech against than Red Blue. So suddenly they can play all these 4 willpower stuff with Daisy, Nala, Ursula. Troubadour is kind of a 4 willpower card. Neverland is 4 willpower. So they're kind of saying, okay, you can have your bell, but your bell isn't one-shotting anything, and then I can build wide enough of a board to really punish you. Another interesting thing is I think that it's only playing 3 Storm just because Blue Steel often doesn't give a lot of good Storm targets, and then maybe you'd be better off not playing another uninkable Tweaker song.
I found that crazy as well, the 3 Storms, and also the one of Vanessa shows, because I think Steel Song, when it was really, really good, it was in a meta where you were where you're shooting every turn with stuff, and after that refilling your hand, and them taking out one of those key shoot elements that has been very relevant before really shows in what meta we are. Also the Bianca, which isn't really a good card or doesn't really progresses you in the game, but it has a 5/5 stat line, which is really good against Blue Steel. I think it can take out a few things, and I mean it dies to Zeus, but besides, and that shows that the direction of this deck has turned a bit, I think.
For sure. Yep. Next one.
Honestly, just like in general, it's kind of the story of like a bunch of decks this set, like Ember Emerald, Ember Steel. It's like some of these decks didn't get new cards, but just with the meta changing, like they are changing how they want to be positioned in this meta.
For sure. That's one of the more interesting things about card games, in my opinion, how the meta constantly fluctuates and like certain decks can kind of come back and then disappear again. And then it's also like that's also an element of player skill, is like not only just like building a decent deck, but building a decent deck for the field that you expect, or trying to take a particular angle on it to kind of beat the meta. Do you know if any particular changes were made for the Rats list, Moyen?
Yeah, for sure. They were playing an Oswald build. I played them.
Oh, yeah, correct.
And they were playing like Oswald items. Now suddenly they're on like something very or no, not very. I mean, it's like an aggressive Blue Steel dog list, but it's playing I think the 4-drop Scooch is very good for like the aggressive blue decks.
That's what Bennett was mentioning earlier. Yeah.
And then this is going like very heavy on the Alice Gantu, kind of saying, okay, I play Alice and you can't do anything. Then I quest with Alice, give Gantu ward, and it's like over a few turns, 6 lore that you cannot really do anything about.
Sorry, just because of the Alice and Gantu thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, if you want to.
No, I got it.
Okay, because I've been playing green-purple as well, and I played the Goofy, the 1/4 that also gives ward on quest for 3 lore, and pair it with the Queen, the new legendary, and this is, I think, the same amount. Let me quickly... Alice is... No, it's more in Blue Steel, but that's the same approach that we say, okay, Goofy, and then the drop next turn can't be killed by Blue Steel, and we get those guaranteed lore, and if you're not fast enough, we just finish the game, kind of. I think that's really interesting. This probably is better because it's in a Blue Steel shell as well.
Yeah, so in general, I think they built this deck super well. It's like, I think the 4 Ana is also tackling the Blue Steel meta very well. So 4 Ana, the Gantus with the Alice, but also the 5/5 Scrooge. I'm a little bit surprised there's only 2 Flower Charms. I know you want to use the best item usage is for Bell and then play Dog, but with 8 items, I think you can support more than 4 Bell and 2 Flower Charm. Like at least a third one, I think I would have liked to see. But this is one of the better builds of the aggressive Blue Steel versions that I've seen.
Do you still like the 1-drop Mulan over something like a Mickey?
I don't feel super passionate about it. I think Mickey is sometimes, it's good that it doesn't get stormed, right? But also, as soon as there's a 3/3 sitting on the opposing side, you kind of have to wait. And Mulan has some upside in like cycling and maybe getting rid of an unankable. I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Sure. It's cheap. I just saw that the list is cheap. It does not play any of the crazy. I mean, cheap in comparison to other Blue Steel shares with other cards. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, this reminds me very much of like, I mean, it's very similar to kind of Harlan's initial build from the EU Continentals, right? Because he was playing the Gantus, the Scrooges, I'm pretty sure. So it has so many elements of that mixed in with like, you know, the Bell and the new package. So like, I still think it's great that versions like this exist for Blue Steel. For the reason that you mentioned, Bennett, is that like it still makes the color combo accessible. This is still a powerful deck. Within the meta, like, you know, the line of doing the Alice and Gantu it's difficult for these more expensive blue steel decks to overcome potentially. So yeah, I just like seeing the amount of different versions of blue steel decks that kind of currently exist within the meta right now. Okay, it's our time to talk, Bennet.
Let's go.
I have yet to test decks like this, and I don't know what it is that's holding me back, because I think for the most part, I really the idea of what a deck like this is doing. It's still a little kind of combo-y for my particular taste, where, you know, I'm putting stuff in the discard. Maybe I'm trying to fuel a big Chernobog. If I'm being completely honest, the thing that's kind of put me off, and maybe I just need to play it and try it, is the more I'm looking at this tramp, I like it, the 2-cost tramp. I'm seeing some people play this even without the 1-cost lady, because the effect of it is like pretty decent at times. But it's the 1-drop lady that I just can't really get behind, in terms of it's this 1-cost uninkable 1/2 that sometimes maybe quests for 2. I think honestly I just need to play it and try it and get rid of just like looking at the card and saying I don't really like it that much. But the general concept of this deck seems pretty cool. I like the warded Prince Philip. The Prince Bodyguard is quite interesting as well. Some stuff that you can do. I haven't really done it that much, but I'm always a fan with these like 0-cost cards, or sorry, 0-strength cards, like the Nala or like the Prince, where you could actually like challenge into something and then play a Rapunzel. I just like the idea of that kind of play pattern. And I do believe, Moyen, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. I think the changes that were made to this list was there used to be Cloud Kickers in place of the Prince Philip, but now it's Prince Philip instead, which kind of makes sense to me, because Kit, while it's a good card, against a lot of the blue steel cards, it doesn't really do much, right? Like everything's 3 strength or higher pretty much. But yeah,
Can give an Hiram back.
Yes,
but that's about it.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'd love to hear your initial thoughts on this type of deck, because I'm eager to at least try a version like this.
So you said, I think the reason why Lady is in there is you can play Daisy on 1, and on 2 you can play Lady plus the Tramp and give your Daisy 2 attacks, so she can challenge a Bell and actually survive the Bell. I think that's one of the use cases this Lady has. Me personally, I don't like it either, because if I don't have a Tramp, it's such a bad card. Maybe in a deck that's relatively low ground, you're okay to have like the low cost bad cards sometimes, because you can still use them or flood the board, whatever. I personally do not like. I can see the list. I can see the list working. I think it needs a bit more thought behind it, and you need to set a direction. You can't be like, okay, I'm building a bit of this and a bit of this, and I can beat control and I can beat aggro. I think you need to take a straight direction on what you want to do with the deck, and it has cool synergies. That's what I can say. But I'm also personally not a fan of Chernobog, because most of the time I have not played the deck to full potential. I've tested it a bit. Maybe I wasn't so good on playing Tramp in the right moment, so my Chernobog actually costs 0, but most of the time before turn 5 or 6, my Chernobog still costs 4, and then a 4 Ink 9/9 3 Law is not enough in my opinion, when I also shuffle bad cards potentially back into my deck. But it's definitely interesting, and I really like that this color combination got something new to play with. I think the Mufasa was the closest that got to this color combination in terms of aggro and like board sticky stuff. So I'm interested in seeing how this will work out. Yeah.
Moyen, any thoughts on the deck? You don't like it?
No, I mean, so a lot of, I don't know, in chat, a lot of people said, okay, we're struggling with blue steel against this. So far, I didn't struggle at all with blue steel against this. I do think the Lady is a good card in this deck. I think even if it can seem clunky, the way that this deck can win is if it like for example pulls off a good draw off the Rapunzel, but then can like flood the board really efficiently. I think it improves the Tramp by enough where I think this Lady is still a good card, even if it like kind of looks weird as a 1-cost uninkable 1/2 at times. Yeah, I don't like the Isma in this, but in general, I mean, I'm not super passionate about the list because like I don't think it's one of the stronger decks. But I don't think a 2/2 draw 1 discard 1 is good enough, even with the synergy with like a
Chernobog, yeah.
Chernobog. Yeah.
This hard loses to red blue probably. It has the explosive start where we can finish on like 4 or 5 if we start and stuff like this. But I think this is way better against blue steel because it can go wide on the board instead of being good against red blue. But yeah,
for sure. Yeah, the Prince Philip is probably the only thing that helps it against the red blue matchup.
Yeah.
We got Sailor's List. Just looking at this, I mean, I'm gonna just kind of do a bit of a back and forth here, just for myself to kind of look at the difference between Frederico's list on Sailor's List. So from what I can see here, there's no manners, and everything else looks very similar. Am I missing anything, Moyen?
Yeah, I'm surprised they're still on Sharks. I thought I don't know. I have this like gut feeling that we're moving, like Blue should be moving away from Sharks. But I guess they're still here.
What do you think they're
first round? No, they lost, right?
No, maybe. Yeah, it lost the Specie, right? It lost the Specie.
Yeah, so maybe like the losers bracket is like a particular bracket where Shark makes more sense than like in general. But like I think in general, I want to say we are moving away from
and what do you think? Yeah, sorry. Scrooge, right? Got you. That was a very fancy answer, confident answer. Yeah.
How much money do you get from Scrooge that you?
Oh, I still need to buy my Scrooges.
Are you still using? Are they still proxied?
Well, some of the Scrooges survived, but yeah, some of them are proxies.
Yeah, I'm actually still waiting for mine to arrive too. And then we got Ed's red blue list. Did Ed change complete? No, Ed was playing red blue round 1, right?
But Ed was playing like the DKP list, but with 4 Scar, so like an action heavy 4B prep 4 Scar 4 Quill list that could like giga ram to a clear.
Mm-hmm.
And now they are playing a 4 Tamatoa list. Okay, is Ed capable of putting like a card into his deck, but not 4 copies?
Ed's a big fan of 4 copies of a lot of things, right? A lot of the time.
Yeah. Last week already, it was 4 copies of everything. First round, I submitted something that was like 4 copies of everything except 2 cards, about 2 copies each. But generally, I hate when it's 4 copies only. I think usually like there's so much value in having options that more often than not, I think it's not correct to just have 4s in your deck. So they're bringing back Maleficence. Yeah.
Especially with cards that can like look at the top 2 cards and you can decide which card you want. I think you benefit from having a few toolbox cards like the Frederico list we looked at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think also like the 4 of lists that make a little bit more sense. Like when you're starting to test stuff, to kind of see, okay, how does all of this work? How do these games play out? What game plans would I rather go for? And then like you make tweets maybe a little bit later. We'll think, okay, actually I can get away with playing 3 Maleficent or 3 Maui, something like that. But like, okay, playing 4 in the early stages of testing phases can be okay. But I think the more we'll progress, I think the less we'll see 4s.
Okay, the next one's from Domingo, and I'm glad to see that we have a Ruby Amethyst list here, because I feel like we've talked about the idea of this list for the past 2 weeks, and I'm glad we can just show off a deck that kind of highlights these locations. I also want to name drop, I think it's Taris Black on Twitter is like the guy that's really trying to push this red-purple into the meta and kind of just keep red-purple alive. So like shout out to him, fair play for like myself and Bennet know how that feels with Amber Emerald, where like, you know, we feel like it's just kind of dead in the water at times. But yeah, this is a interesting version of Ruby Amethyst. Cusco's back in obviously instead of the Flynn Sisu package, because that seems so much weaker now with all of the removal within blue steel. And then yeah, these locations, I feel like on paper, like looking at the list, it's probably, I mean, I feel like you'd have more knowledge of this, Moyen, because you've kind of just thought about locations a lot more with like manners and stuff like that and like the actual impact of locations. But on paper, something like this is like, it just probably looks weird to see, okay, you've just got like, you know, kind of a vanilla location for Fairy Ship, a vanilla Forbidden Mountain. Like, what do you think that these locations add to Ruby Amethyst to... Like, do you think there's a particular reason why people are trying to go in this direction as to why it would help Ruby Amethyst in a meta like this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the main thing is the best deck in the format doesn't deal any damage to locations if it can challenge them. Which means even the vanilla locations, let's say now you have them at different ink costs. So let's say you have 8 ink, you play B-Prep Ferry Ship. And there's no way that can ever get banished. And if they don't play Pete, maybe you B-Prep them again. Maybe, I don't know if these lists shouldn't just be playing 4 B-Prep if locations are such big part of their strategy.
This is something I believe Taras had mentioned. I watched a clip, or it might have been a video that he mentioned, and he said, yeah, this it's funny. This actually could be like Taras's initial build of the list that like Domingos looked at and had some influence from. But from what I believe Taras was saying, he was like, yeah, he was suggesting other cards that he would potentially cut in order to have the 4th B prep, because like you mentioned, Moyen, it's that impactful.
Yeah, I think it's like one of the best cards in your deck, because without the B preps, the locations get a lot worse. If you B prep me, I place a few characters, and then suddenly I'm allowed to challenge with these characters. I think a lot of the strength of this list can be lost. But I haven't played against this much, and I think if there's a way forward for Ruby Amethyst, I think it's something similar to this. And if not, then that sucks.
I like that they play 3 crabs, because last set we played 2, or red purple played 2 crabs, and I think now you want to set up the location on 1 and force your opponent to attack into it, and then you have your Diablo 1-drop that can beat a bell, for example, and also probably I have not tested it, but the 4 health against the bell with 3 attack is probably very effective as well, and I think that's the reason Zach included the Neverland location in his Steel Song 2. As kind of an answer, and I think it's really interesting. I like red purple, and I definitely will try this one
for sure.
The funniest thing is when you look at this list and it just looks purple. Where are the red cards?
Yeah. It's nearly mono amethyst. Yeah.
Crazy.
And then we get to the worst deck of all. It's Moyen's list. Yeah.
Oh, what a list. Okay, I will pass over to you guys. I talk about this deck enough.
Okay, my initial thoughts, because I played against this a lot yesterday. Just stop. You 3. No. I remember this because we started this off, and Moyen's like, yeah, I think I could have Pete. I think you said you could have Cogsworth to put the Zeus in, whatever. Then this guy goes like, Cogsworth, Pete, or something like this against me. His whole board was just Pete and Cogsworth. He's like, yeah, these are the two cards I like cut. I'm like, man, what is this? But yeah, I mean, I think it's a strong list. I enjoyed testing against it. I guess like against my list, it's probably not a good card, but like I never saw the last cannon. The last cannon was probably, maybe you inked it a couple of times. You probably did.
In most matchups, you don't use it a lot. It's like, but it's a 1-cost inkable item that can vanish.
That's so cool. Also, the shield has another niche effect, which probably doesn't come into effect very, very often. But as you mentioned, it's a 1-cost item. So you pick the 1-cost item you probably can use like 5% of the time.
Yeah. And it's inkable.
And it's inkable, of course. And what I really like about this list, you have talked about it this podcast, that you changed SME and Tipo. And I think because of that, because people are reacting to Blue Steel, especially in the early game, where I think Blue Steel wants to set up, or besides the bell, of course, but even try to work with the bell. Having the Tipo is an option more in the early game beside Sail, and you already mentioned a use case where you can kill the Pluto or attack the Pluto with the Tipo, stuff like this. You have Last Cannon you can give damage, and I think that's a really great choice to in the setup phase, and rather go onto options for ramping than having the SME as a good card in your deck.
Yeah. So, okay, honestly, I can yap about this a little bit. It's because that's the biggest change to the deck, right? Changing a Pete and a Cogsworth for Zeus, it's kind of whatever, it's the same deck. But like cutting 4 SMEs, putting in 4 Tipos completely changes a lot of how to view and play the deck. And at the start, the SME was in there as kind of trying to keep blue, or to keep one Blue Steel philosophy up, which was that depending on the game state, on the matchup on my hand, I can decide, do I want to ramp on 2 into a 4-drop, which historically Blue Steel basically never wanted to do, because the 4-drops were just Flavasham. And that was extremely slow, except maybe against Red-Blue or maybe in the mirror. But now with the Scrooge, it was actually suddenly a playable line, especially now that we can contest the early game with Bell. Now it's much better than it ever used to be to ramp on 2. But in my head, I still like the quill line is still super fast. You can go if you go like 2-drop on 2, quill on 3 into either Flavasham or maybe Tamatoa if you had enough popsicles. Because Forest Spheres is a little bit annoying in that line. You don't always have the ink to banish them. And then go like straight to the 8-drop Tamatoa. But if you went to the 6-drop Tamatoa, it's also not easy to have 2 items for the 6-drop, but also an item for the 8-drop Tamatoa. But that was like the fastest line because you just have the turn 5 Tamatoa. But the more and more, so I wanted to have like the flexibility between these 2 openings and have 2 different openings that I can go for. But the more and more I played, I realized the percentage of games where I have the option and I actually prefer to go Smee on 2 into Quill than Ramp on 2 into either Flavasham or Scooch was like, it was too little. It was so small that I thought, okay, instead of having the option for both openings, I would much rather just have that 2-drop Ramp into Scooch/Flavasham opening more often. And I don't need to play a 2-drop that doesn't ramp me, even if Smee is like a great card. And then if you don't want to go for the Smee Quill curve, it just doesn't fit your game plan well enough to still make the cut, and then the TPO is much better. So that was the main thing. And then there's a few other things. One of them is how do aggressive decks try to defeat Blue Steel? They play 4 willpower stuff. They play Neverland, they play Daisy Duck, they play Little John in Emerald, stuff like that. And so if you're playing against an aggressive deck, you open Bell, maybe it's still too slow. But what if you open Bell and then suddenly you see, okay, I'm playing against a Daisy, I'll play a T-Po on 2. Quest with your Daisy, I dare you. And suddenly, because otherwise they could like quest, and if you challenge, maybe they wait until Rapunzel, suddenly you're like so much faster in stopping their early lore game. So that can be very important, although usually Sail is better because the 1 ink you can use very well. Having an extra item can be very good, for example, when you open Bell into Flavasham and not Bell into Scooch. But there's situations where T-Po is better. Sometimes later it can provide an extra damage for strength, which can be nice. And then the other side of the story is, okay, if I don't play Quill on 3, when do I actually Quill? Quill seems very weird in this deck, because if you're ramping on 2, you don't want to Quill on 3. You want to play a 4-drop on 4, and maybe a 5-drop on 5, maybe a 6-drop on 6. So you could think Quill is no longer good enough, but it is very much good enough. It's still just another item to hit for the Quill. And let's say you ramp into Flavasham and Flavasham sticks, that's a great turn to play Quill if you can, because suddenly you have like so many cards. You have to, like, the next best thing to do is not get more cards, it's actually being able to use those cards quicker and ramping and getting to the 8-drop Tamatoa quicker. You need to get to the 8-drop Tamatoa, or you also need to get to 10 ink so you can actually like play Tamatoa, use the dime on it before your opponent has time to banish it. And also one of the better turns to use Quill will be the turn where if you're 6-drop, like let's say I play, an optimal curve could be item on 1, play Bell, either T-Po or Sail and another item, play Scooch on 3, play Cogsworth on 4, play Tamatoa on 5. Now I can trade, I don't even have to exert my Tamatoa. Maybe I sing a song with it, maybe I don't. I trade with my Bell and my Scooch that have resist. I play a Tamatoa with resist. This at 4-5 on 5 with resist 1, it doesn't always get banished. And if it doesn't get banished, this can also like you don't really have to play a free dime every time you can. I think the first turn after your 6-drop Tamatoa sticks is a great turn to play the Quill and just accelerate towards the 8-drop Tamatoas and like just playing more stuff in the same turn, or playing enough items, exerting them to play Scooch. So it's still really helpful to accelerate you, although Quill, like Last Cannon, is a card that, or like Quill, Last Cannon, Tamatoa probably are the cards that definitely do get inked a lot. But they still provide enough when you do play them, and for the item, in the items case, they also provide just extra consistency for Scooch, Flavasham, and Tamatoa.
Yeah,
I realized you do have a way of clearing the fairy ship after BPrep because you play 2 Zeus.
Yeah, okay, I can clear it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to, but I just
So I guess most locations you can clear after BPrep. I guess the 1-drop location you could clear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we actually just included one other deck towards the end here. It's not part of the LCCC segment, but it's actually a green-purple burn list. I'm going to have to zoom out a little bit so everyone can see. Yeah, so LD made this list. I think he said he was just like it's kind of just like another take on a burn list, or as Moyen and Spessy keep trying to say, story list. But yeah, again, I haven't played this yet, but this seems quite interesting. Bennet, have you any experience playing a list like this?
I have played it yesterday. Shout out to John Preyer, a friend of mine who's also playing Lorcana, and he tested it. I think the only change he made is taking out the snakes. Oh yeah, he put in. Oh, that's crazy. He put in the 2-drop Diablo, the new one, the dual ink one.
Mm-hmm.
So you even have one more shift target onto it. I think burn decks in general, or story decks in general, have to find a balance between constantly drawing new cards and still progressing lore-wise in the game. Because I remember in set 6, we took out Friends on the Other Side out of green-purple, which was always a big staple, very important, because we wanted to be more effective in questing earlier and putting the game down earlier. And that's always kind of this anti-synergetic when you have a song you want to sing to draw cards, but you also want to quest. I think the exception here in this list is Ursula, Deceiver of All. She makes this decision way easier. And also Diablo is a good card that you can use to sing the songs instead of like questing. But I think we already said this is my family. I tested it, and I think Moyen as well said that it doesn't feel, maybe it reads good, but it doesn't feel good because you are losing a law. But on the other hand, I had games where my opponent just couldn't do a single thing because I already had my burn in hand, and it was like a checkmate 3 turns before the game officially ended, because I knew in these 3 turns my opponent has no single way of ending the game and no single way of taking a card from my hand, and I have like 2 Gathering Wisdoms and 1 Goat in hand, and I know it's enough, and that was pretty straightforward. So I don't think it's like the best deck, and it will explode in popularity, but it definitely can punish decks that take a bit more time to develop. Like the more rampy Blue Steel gets, and kind of goes away from the I try to end the game as early as possible, and because it needs to have more reactive cards or something like this, you can pretty straightforward just quest, ignore the enemy board and end the game. So it's definitely a deck that's worth trying out. It also makes use or abuses like the really good card Diablo, which when it sticks just gives you way more win percentages in games that you wouldn't normally have because you have way more cards in hand suddenly.
Awesome, yeah. Well, that was a lot of deck lists that we discussed, but yeah, it was a great time. So yeah, there you have it, guys. Many deck lists. Honestly, I feel like that was nearly like a weird kind of meta report, even though it wasn't really a meta report, right? Like, it was really good conversations talking about pretty much every deck that's more or less in the meta at the moment. A lot of different versions of the decks that exist, and the only thing that would make this set better right now is if we had a chance to compete, in my opinion, if we had some big tournaments to go to. But I will give a shout out to some that are upcoming that I don't know if many people know, at least within Europe. There's the I think it's Lore League Italia or whatever. There's like a big event coming up, not this weekend, it's the weekend after, and that has like a pretty cool pricing structure to it. There will then be the Ravensburger event in April, which unfortunately I think is sold out. Moyen, did you?
I'm going there though.
Me too.
Okay, nice, awesome. And another event that popped up was only announced this week that like sold out way quicker than I thought. That Jan is very disappointed about, unfortunately. But it's the UK Games Expo at the end of May, and this is going to be the first tournament where folks can actually win the 2025 promo playmat, which I'm super excited to potentially get my hands on. The structure for that is it's going to be a 128 player event on the Saturday, which is it's set 7 is legal. It's the pre-release weekend for Reign of Jafar, so the Saturday will be set 7 event, and on the Friday and the Sunday there's going to be a 64 player sealed tournament, which is actually going to be really fun. And yeah, I'm excited for that. It's cool to still see at least some tournaments happening, but Ravensburger, if you're listening, please. I saw a tweet earlier this week that actually said this week last year was the week that they announced the whole DLC schedule.
Oh,
so
boy.
yeah, it's like it makes
It's time.
Yeah, it makes me even more desperate to just hear any news.
I remember driving back from Posen. The first, it was unofficial, and the tickets went live when we were driving back home. And I remember my heart broke feeling when I didn't get the ticket first because there was a limited person. And it's so glad that it worked out last year for the rest of the year. And we can just sit here and hope for the best, I think. But what else can we do besides play Lorcana and wait for new official tournaments?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, in the meantime, shout out to Pavel once again for hosting this LCCC. Like, without this, there wouldn't be all of these interesting games to watch, honestly. Like, I know Moyen, like, it seems like you're having a great time participating, encourages you to stream and test more probably than you would usually, right? Like, if there is nothing to compete in, like, you know, like playing Lorcana is incredibly fun. And I even had a weekend last Saturday, I just went to a friend's house. There was like 5 or 6 of us, and we just jammed and we tested, and it was fun. But I'm like, you know, I want something to compete for. And even for me, at least, even if there's like something that's only like the LCCC that's happening, but you can see like this clear meta development, and I can go to, you know, my own play group and test stuff internally as well, and to see how like this meta is evolving on this kind of, you know, broadcasted tournament, that's much better than if nothing were happening at all. So yeah, once again, Bennet, I want to give a huge shout out to you for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to hanging out with you at the next tournament. Before we actually close out, I'm curious, the event that you participated in, it was like an online event, right?
Yeah, it was an online tournament. It's restricted to Germany only though, because it's actually from my team. So shout outs to Playing Ducks. I have the logo here. They are really doing a great job trying to give something to the community, especially in these times, because this tournament was for free, even though it has had a great for relatively to its being free, a good price structure and really great place to have fun and play Lorcana. So that was an interesting experience. And also online tournaments, I mean, if we have no official physical tournaments, online tournaments would do it as well, I think. But the higher pricing there is, the more dangerous online tournaments get, I think. Yeah.
The more brooms may be pointed to, perhaps. Let's just say that. Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yep.
The more people may be sitting under the desk switching
with the cards just coming up like this. Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was I had such a great time here. If people want to find me, you can find me on Twitter. It's Bennet_Lorcana. I also just started a YouTube channel where I VOD review my Amber Emerald game. So if you're interested in what my thought processes were, those were very great games. It's also Bennet_Lorcana, and I would love to connect with you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll leave a link to all of your socials and stuff down below in the video description. Yeah, so closing this out. If you guys enjoyed this episode of the podcast, be sure to leave us a review over on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, your local podcast platform. There is a video version of this over on youtube.com/@PodcanaPodcast. Hit the subscribe while you're there. We are still so close to 5k. I said this last week, but we're like 40. No, we're like 40 subs away. Moyen's bringing it up with all of the streaming that's going on, but it would mean a lot if you guys subscribed, stuck with us. New episodes of the podcast coming at you every single week. Twitters are @Bennet_Lorcana, @Moyen_HS, and @Kawatech_CG. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned to hear about Moyen's Metafy. That's going to be going live soon. And yeah, we'll catch you guys in the next one.